Hi, it's Michael Pilarski, another video for Friends of the Trees Botanicals. And today is March 28th, 2020. This is the day that we're really seriously locked down here in Washington State because of coronavirus. And so I couldn't have this workshop. We were going today to have a workshop on micro-farming medicinal plants. And we can't do it because of governor's orders. So we're taking a video instead so that you can still experience the steps it takes to do micro-farming medicinal plants. So here we are on our 1/4 acre in beautiful Chimacum, Washington. It's a very small plot, 1/4 acre, so that's why we call it micro-farming. But on this farm, we're producing about 80 different species of medicinal plants, which includes woody stem plants, shrubs, and we also have a lot of herbaceous perennials. We have a lot of biennials, annuals, so it's a wide variety of medicinal plants. And we produce a lot of medicine here. And so this goes out to thousands of people every year are getting remedies from this little small micro farm. And it's very intensive, and we have quite a few different tactics, you might say different kinds of herbs, like the perennial evergreen clumpers here, like this motherwort and this catnip, which usually only lasts 2 or 3 years. This will be its 3rd year. Here's betony, which is a long-term perennial that we just collect the leaves from, so the aerial. And then we have things that we dig the roots from. So we do a lot of root digging here as well. And we also sell berries, because most berries could be considered medicinal. Some are specifically medicinal, like we have a lot of elderberry here. Elderberry is very good for antivirals. The market for elderberries has really increased because of the coronavirus, and so we've had them growing here since the start. This is our 4th year. We're just starting our 4th growing season, so it's been 3 years since it was just a cleanly tilled field. It was just a blank slate. We planted it, except there were a bunch of weeds and chickweeds and grasses in here, so it wasn't a blank slate. It had a lot of weeds, and so we've had to, over the years, continue to weed. In our farm, we use a lot of mulch, thick chip mulch here, and so that really reduces our need for weeding. And underneath here, the soil is, you can see where the chips are grading into the soil here. The chips become the soil. There are a lot of soil life in here. There's a lot of worms these days, a lot more worms. There was hardly any worms when we started, but they love this chip mulch stuff. And so underneath here, this pathway, my crop roots are all under here during the growing season to take advantage of the full area. Here's some areas where we do have dirt, and we will have to weed that. We need to get more mulch material. So for every time of the year, there's particular work that we're doing. There's not much in the winter, but we don't have much snow cover, so we do a little work in the winter. But in the spring, there's a great big push to get the garden ready for the year, and there's 7 main things we do. 1, we prune up all the shrubs, and then 2, we prune up last year's dead stalks. 3, we do spring root digging for filling orders, big roots of elecampane or marshmallow, teasel, etc. So there are a lot of big roots on the ground here. And number 3, we dig propagation, or 4, we dig propagation material for sale, because we have a lot of propagation material here. 5, we catch up on the weeding. 6, we catch up, we do planting and then mulching. So those are the 7 steps to get ready for the whole season. And then after that, life's easy if you get those 7 steps all done nicely, all in good timing. And so the first step is to clean up last year's debris of stems. This is motherwort here, and I have to clip this really short because in a little while I'll be cutting these greens. They're one of the first greens to be harvested in the spring, is this motherwort. And you don't want all these dried stems in there, of course, so you have to go through and very carefully clean up from last year. And so I do this for many of my plants. Now, it's good to know that I like to leave this debris in the field during the winter. I only clean it up in the spring. And the reason being, it provides a lot of habitat, a lot of parts are decaying, and so it adds to the fertility of the soil. So it's just way better to leave the garden long in the tooth, so to speak, and full of more debris during the winter. And in the spring you have to clean it all up, get ready for the year. So there's our motherwort cleanup. After that, I also have to clean up these blue vervain, just starting to pop up out of the ground there. So after clipping the tops, that was pretty minimal there, I rake up the stems and we'll haul them off the field so they're not in the way. And you can see over here our pile from this spring cleanup along that edge over there. There's a lot of debris, and that was all habitat over the winter. And that will end up being either used in a hugelkultur or composted back into the field. None of it goes to waste. It's all useful material. All this debris is fertilizer and mulch. So after doing that cleaning, the other thing in the spring is the spring weeding. So every spring I go through and thoroughly weed the whole patch. And I'm pretty meticulous at it, weeding. This is, I already got the other side of this. Now I'm just cleaning up this side. This is a nice little sickle or hoe I just got last year. I never had one like this before. It's really good for getting close into things when the weeds aren't too big. So a lot of weeding there. And another weeding tool is you always have your hori on especially the spring, because you can go in and make sure you get every last little weed out around our crop plants. Like here we've just weeded this ladies mantle row, and I can go through and just do any last little cleanup so that there's nothing else there but ladies mantle. So when we come to harvest, it'll be easy and there won't be weeds in the way to clear out. So most of the garden has already been weeded. There's a few patches left at this stage in the game. And so one of the other jobs in the spring or late winter is the pruning. And so here's some red currants, and these are in pretty good shape. I pruned them already to some extent, but I like to leave the centers open. So I'm going to clean off some of this, reduce some of this interior wood here, just so that it's a little bit more open, easier to pick things. So, and then we've just yesterday cleaning up the raspberries, taking out the dead canes and just cutting them back and getting ready for this year's raspberry harvest. We're also dug a bunch of canes here, so we're also getting propagation material. And oh, I should say on the currants here, when we're cutting our currants, we're particularly after things like this, and this is cutting wood. So there's one cutting, two cuttings. That one's kind of wimpy, but here's two nice red currant cuttings. So part of our pruning is also getting propagation material. So same with the raspberries, propagation material. I don't use rooting hormone on the currant. Of course, you just have canes here, but I do use it on this elderberry here. So this is European elderberry, and these have been pretty much pruned for the most part. I could prune them a little bit more, just maybe a little bit more out of the path here, but these have been largely pruned up already, getting rid of where there's too many canes or dead wood. But this year, crossing branches, but this year I'm going to get a really good production of elderflowers and elderberries on this. So we also dug up the young shoots along the side. There was a little thicket of young shoots here, and we still have raspberry down there. So on the raspberry, we're clipping some, but we're letting a lot of raspberries grow in the aisle here, and we'll be harvesting those for leaf. So this will be the fruit stand in the middle, but the side patches will be for raspberry leaf. So that's the pruning aspect. So one of the big jobs in the spring is digging the roots for spring root orders. We do this in the fall as well, but then by the spring there'll be new ones. So here comes a marshmallow, and if you know down this field here, there's all these big roots in the ground. We got a lot of teasel, we have a lot of marshmallow, elecampane. So and so besides selling the roots, which we'll wash off really thoroughly, then we can cut off these. During that process, we cut off generally most all these roots that are coming out, and then we divide the top into some propagation material. So part of the spring work is also propagation material. This is both in one fell swoop, and a hatchet or a heavy knife is handy. I think I'll get one more chop out of that. Okay, so there's nice propagation material, nice bit of root, some nice crowns. Same thing here. Actually, you even get a third one here. That's not quite as big, but that'll work no problem. These are good starts, and so out of that one plant we'll get 8, generally 10 or so tops out of one. And so we're in this case we're getting product and propagation material at the same time. Here I've got a volunteer valerian that's next to the marshmallow, so this has got to come up. So this will be more propagation material. So in a sense, you could say I'm weeding the volunteers, and for something like that, I'm just going to go for. That one didn't work there, but we could split that up or just go for a single propagation piece. That's probably better. And then we have more valerian over here. So when you have a really big clump of valerian, this is a little bit bigger. And notice my stump in the garden. I just planted that. I'm putting a bunch of these in the garden for large woody debris. So this will survive. This is good ecological function. Plus it's kind of nice to have little seats and cutting boards scattered around your little micro farm. So I like putting stumps in, and also snags, so to speak, by putting in some dead pieces of dead poles. So if you can split this up, that crown carefully, so that you end up with top and some root. So that's kind of small, but that will do. This is extra big here. I might still, if you're short on propagation material, you can divide that again. If you have lots of propagation material, you can keep it as a really big one. This will make a big plant this growing season. So that's going to be replanted here. Okay, so propagation material and digging roots in the spring, two of the big jobs. And they both produce income. That's a nice thing about this kind of farming, is that there's income all 4 seasons. The winter, most of the income is dried material that we dry during the growing season. But every part of the season, there's product coming, there's income stream. So just introduce a few of the crops in this section of the garden. Here we have a lot of sweet bergamot coming up. Monarda fistulosa, one of the bee balms. And it's thick, it's in its 4th year here, and so it's a really spreading clump. So they make a lot. And you'll notice if you look down the row here, is that we have quite a bit of dandelion in between the crops. So the dandelion becomes one of the crops. Last year we harvested $500 worth of dandelion root just on our pathways and in between things. Notice the twine here around the bergamot. It gets tall and wants to fall over. So we keep it corralled. We'll add some more twine yet. But you need to keep, this is sort of needs a little extra help. Then we have a lot of thyme, great antiviral. Everybody should be putting lots of thyme in their food at this time. This is getting kind of ragged after 3 years. There's a fair amount of dieback on a lot of this, so it really, we should replace. We'll get another year out of this patch, but we'll be replacing it, adding more this year. And here's a really rare herb, plant, drug, spice, condiment called asafoetida. It's a famous Middle Eastern and Indian spice. Asafoetida, the secret ingredient in Worcestershire sauce. And we're one of the only people around here growing it. So this is actually the 4th year. They haven't, they're getting bigger every year. At some point they're going to send up a massive flower stalk, but we haven't seen that yet. So far it's just been foliage. There's some Joe Pyeweed under here. They aren't really showing yet, but there's a whole row of Joe Pyeweed and black cohosh. Here's our gooseberries and currants, but this is a good example up here of doing a stool bed. So what we're doing is throwing dirt and chips around these lower stems here, and these can then root in here. This needs more. It's not really sufficient, but it's a good start. But we need to add to this. So every one of these stems will be rooting, and we'll just cut off all these lower ones next year, and we'll have a bunch of rooted gooseberry. Over here we have bone set coming up. It isn't coming up yet, but this is the bone set stalks. Again, that's in the, there are people are using that for the coronavirus as well. So the market just went up for that. Interesting, I like to make use of a lot of space, every bit of space in my garden. So here is currants on this side with a peppermint understory, and in between these bone set and these, I have a row of currant cuttings. See, they're just starting to show their green leaves. These are rooting down there, and so next year I will have a couple dozen new black currants plants to sell. So this is becoming a nursery as well. So I take advantage of this walkway by getting one more crop out of it. And then here is Teasel, Lyme disease and other nasty diseases. This has a massive root under here. We haven't dug this. We have to dig this yet this spring. So if we can't find a buyer fresh, we're going to be digging it up and drying it, because this is a biennial. This is the year it goes to seed. We don't want it to go to seed. This is Alexander's or black lovage, Smyrnium, olastrum, and that's a tasty spring green. And back here you can see where, again, crops of dandelion that is going to be an understory for the currants. So we also have dandelion as a crop. Here's some avens for red color. But look at here, here's a lemon balm understory to these currants. This one has crept up to it's right actually in with the currant, and it continues over to here. So these were put in at the same time as the currants. The currants are really small, and we got good production on the lemon balm for the first couple of years. So we're still getting production on this lemon balm, even though it has to compete with this currant for the same airspace. But this is polyculture, putting things in multiple assemblages of plants. And here's the mint, peppermint right on this side, which fades into the raspberry. So we fit a lot of crops in a small space and do a lot of intercropping. So yeah, you could call it a medicinal plant agroforestry system, or it resembles permaculture a fair amount. Okay, here's another corner of the garden, and this is where we had an angelica patch go to seed last year, and lo and behold, we have a great crop of angelica, archangelica seedlings, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. But at any rate, we're going to thin out and save the biggest ones and get rid of most of them. There's also a row of Pho Thi Tieng here, which is just starting. Here's some of the last year's canes, but they're just starting to get going. They're not even really showing, but this is going to have a big trellis, 10 feet tall. Here's a bunch of ginkgo trees here. They're just in here as a nursery crop, but ginkgos is a great medicinal tree. And this area may not look planted, but it's probably 50-70% planted actually maybe 80%. So there's some figwort, Scrophularia nodosa, and we have a nice stands of that in here. And as well as there's some volunteer catnip. We've been letting some of those go because they're helping fill space. Here's lemon balm. We have a whole nice little series of lemon balm here. More figwort. More figwort. And here is again figwort. And here's our a row of meadow sweet. We could never have enough meadow sweet. Such a great painkiller. And so here's a row, some meadow sweet, small row. And then we have up here celandine. It's one of the first things to be harvested in the year. This is actually this foliage actually went all the way through winter. And it's a little bedraggled, so I can either cut it now or I could just let it grow and then get a cutting out of it. But it's not in bad shape. There's a lot of sweet flag in here. Acorus calamus, or calamus root. And there's quite a few rows in here, and the row, it just was one plant to start with, but now it's just really, the rows are getting wider and wider. This year they'll actually meet in the middle, I have a feeling, because these are coming out this way, and these are coming out this way. Here's a catnip and a dandelion that will get to stay. This dandelion will get to stay as well. So again, intercropping to some extent, but mostly this is a sweet flag patch. Up here we have a big bugleweed patch. It started out as 2 rows. Now it's one big bed all the way from there all the way to here. You can see hundreds of little shoots, green shoots coming in. So micro farming medicinal plants is something that more people could do. Local medicine is going to be all the rage. You just wait and see. Local medicine and local food. So grow your own. You can get propagation material from us. And we're also doing a summer and fall workshop on micro farming herbs. And we'll be here at the farm, coronavirus willing. It should be by August, the coast should be clear. And so we'll be doing a workshop in August and then another one in October. So if anybody wants to attend in person, just let us know. Friends of the Trees Botanicals.